Hey guys, how's it going? It's Krista, and today I'd like to share with you a Perfect Pearls Resist technique. The great thing about this technique is you can use any outline stamp that you have in your stash. I'm starting off today with a piece of black cardstock. This cardstock is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm just preparing that for embossing in my stamping tool, first by wiping it down with a dedicated paintbrush just to remove any little dusty debris, and then coming in with a paintbrush, and off screen I have a little container of baby powder. You could also use a anti-static powder tool if you have one. Today I'm using the sentiment Happy Birthday from Simon Says Stamp Let's Celebrate Clear Stamp Set. And I'm just coming in with a T ruler to try to make that sentiment as straight as possible. Some stamping tools do have grid lines on where underneath where the cardstock sits. Mine does not, so I'm using my T ruler. And once I'm happy with that position, I'll just go ahead and pick that stamp up with the tool door. And I'm coming in with some Versamark ink just to ink up that stamp, and I'll close that over to stamp that image onto my cardstock. I find that with Perfect Pearls, this technique works best with black cardstock, but you could really use any colored cardstock that you would like. I'm going to ink up that stamp a couple more times just so that I have a really nicely inked image. And I'll come in with some Ranger Clear embossing powder. And this embossing powder, once it's set, is going to provide us the outline for our sentiment, but also for our balloons. Once I have that sentiment covered with embossing powder, I'll go ahead and set it. I really like to build images one by one when I'm using this technique, just because it prevents me from accidentally messing up a previous image that I stamped. If you're more comfortable to stamp all your images and then emboss in one go, you can do that as well. I'm coming in now with the balloon from the Simon Says Stamp Let's Celebrate stamp set. And you'll notice that I'm leaving the strings of the balloon because I'm going to come in later and add those. And once I'm happy with the image on my card front, I have a variety of Perfect Pearls here, and I've lined them up in order that I want to use them for the Happy Birthday. I'm starting off in the H with the Perfect Pearls Pink Gumball, and I'm using a number 4 round brush. I chose number 4, but I believe that a number 6 would also work if that's what you have on hand, just because some of the areas are kind of slimmer on this particular stamp. I don't think I would use a brush that was larger, but if you're more comfortable in using multiple brushes or one that's smaller, you can do that as well. And as I add the Perfect Pearl to the letters, I'm making sure that it's mostly pretty opaque except for where it overlaps with another color. In those areas, I'm trying to leave those areas a little bit more translucent. I add more water to the pearls in those areas because I want there to be a little bit of blending in the final product. And I'm moving on to the first P because I want the H to dry a little bit before I add that blue. And for this first P, I'm using Perfect Pearls in Forever Violet. And I should mention that every time I switch between letters, I am taking the opportunity to clean off my brush before moving on. And notice how when I paint over the set embossing powder with the Perfect Pearl, it resists that Perfect Pearl. And since the Perfect Pearl is prevented from sticking to the cardstock where the embossing powder is, it keeps those outlines of those letters really nice and crisp. And again, I'm going to skip the second P and I'll move on to the Y. And now that I have a few letters completed, I'll go back to that A and add the blue. So I did start in the portion that was all A that I wanted to be all blue, and then I did drag my brush into the portion of the A that overlaps with the H. I then took the opportunity to clean off my brush just in case there was any wet remaining pink gumball perfect pearls. I wouldn't be dragging it into the remaining of my A. And now that I've cleaned off my brush, I'm moving on to the second P, making sure to color the areas that are strictly just that P first. And again, I'm trying to have a thicker opacity in the areas that are strictly that one letter, and then when they overlap, making them a little bit more translucent, a little bit more transparent, so I get that little bit of blending. So I'll go ahead and finish up the rest of those letters off camera, and I'll move on to the balloons. I chose blue hydrangea for this first balloon just because I really like the color. And as I put down this perfect pearl, I'm trying to layer most of the powder at the bottom and then pull that powder up with a slightly cleaned off brush just to kind of blend it out. You know how when you blow up a balloon, they're kind of scrunched more at the bottom and then they get more transparent as you go towards the top. I'm trying to go for that. Some colors were easier to create this effect than others, and you can always layer your product once the perfect pearl has had a chance to dry a little bit. But for now, I'm going to go on to the strings of the balloon, and just on a piece of scrap paper, I have perfect pearls in confetti white, and I'm still using the number 4 round brush. I'm just practicing drawing my strings before I draw them on my actual card front. This stamp set does come with a balloon string, but I wanted them to be all different, so that's why I chose to draw them freehand. If you're not comfortable in drawing freehand, you can always stamp that stringed image under each balloon and then add like the little bow and the little kind of end details later if you would like. And I chose to add these little details right underneath the balloon just so that you know that they're balloons and not something else. So as I draw these details underneath the balloon for the string, I'm drawing 2 little lines out, one on each side from the base of the balloon, and then one little line down on each side of the base of the balloon just to create like where like an end would be tied. And I decided to add some splatter to this, and I don't have a die for the sentiment happy birthday, so I'm just using my stamp. And I went ahead and I cut 4 balloons using the corresponding die from Simon Says Stamp Let's Celebrate Stamp and Die Set. And this is just out of a scrap piece of cardstock. I cut these 4 balloons just to cover them. They don't need to be taped down. So I'm now coming in with some perfect pearls and perfect gold and adding that little bit of water just to create a mixture that I can splatter. And directly over my stamp and over my 4 little dies, I'm adding those splatters. The other option to cover the happy birthday would be to stamp the image happy birthday on a scrap piece of paper and fussy cut it out. I found though that just using the stamp and then cleaning it off right after worked just as well. I wanted to add a little bit of a matte to this card front, so I'm using 2 rectangles from Simon Says Stamp Basic Rectangle Die Set. The largest rectangle is 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches, and I just chose a rectangle that's smaller from the set just to create a frame that I liked. And once I have that die cut out, I'll add my card front to that with some Tombow liquid adhesive. And the final step is just to add this entire card front to a note card base. This is an A2 card base, and again, I'm adding this with Tombow liquid adhesive. And that completes today's quick and versatile project. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.